This podcast was recorded on September 10th, 2017. By the time you hear it, things may have changed. Welcome to Black Women Talk Politics. I'm Sheila Strain Clark, and I have a special guest here in the studio today. Sabria is with family, and so we're thinking of her. And I'm joined by my husband, Mr. Lamont Clark.
That would be me. I am the producer of the show, so I'm always here. I'm just never verbally around for you guys to enjoy the tone of my voice. You know how that goes.
Silky smooth voice.
Right,
Yes,
right.
yes.
Barry White. I'm gonna get my Barry White on today.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, this is going to be a little bit of a different podcast. We got some
Right, because I am not a black woman.
we got some
But I can't-
testosterone mixed in with
Right.
estrogen
I
here.
can't talk politics.
All right.
I just, I'm black. So I got the black and the politics part. I just don't have the woman thing down, so
We welcome you to the audio family.
Right,
And
right,
you're always
right.
in the production family. So
Indeed.
So we haven't been together actually in like a week and a half, and
Certainly.
it's been quite busy internationally and really domestically. So
Yeah.
I know we were going to talk a little bit about what's going on internationally first, and then talk about what's going on here at home domestically. So where should we start, Lamar?
Well, I mean, there's always stuff going on. Let's make sure we understand that, right? I mean, I think part of the reason why you guys do this show is to give people an opportunity to synthesize the information, right? Because really a day doesn't go by where something doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
And-
when you think about like just how much more informed, one of the things we do with the show that I like is we're keeping people informed along the way.
Right.
So when the election comes up, folks will kind of see.
Right.
what's
But
been
even
going
beyond
on.
that, I mean, I think the great thing that you guys are doing again is synthesizing the information. I mean, I don't consider myself a politics dude, right? Like, I could argue all day long about whatever you want to argue about, but I don't consider myself a politics dude. I don't have time for that, right? But I think there's a lot of other people who just don't have time for that. But what you guys are able to do is you can take the stuff that happens in the course of a week and synthesize it into bite-sized pieces so that people can hear it during the course of 60 minutes, right?
Right.
Like I could take an hour out of my day to listen to you guys talk about stuff that happened over the course of 7 days. So I think that's the important part, and it doesn't stop one way or another. Elections 2018 beyond, it doesn't stop there. So I just want to make sure I give you guys praise on what you are doing to help people stay informed on the topics. With that out the way, okay, so one of the things that happened over the course of the last week and a half was North Korea, right? We got my man
Kim Jong Un.
Kim Jong Un. He's
I call him Baby Trump. Really.
I mean, listen, he I guess to be a leader of a country, you gotta have a certain sort of bravado about you, right? Like you're not gonna go in there and be timid, but these guys carry a little bit of crazy with them, or maybe a lot of bit of crazy.
Right.
And Un, he really likes to push people's buttons, and that's no pun intended on what we're about to talk about. He really is trying to intimidate the world community by what he did recently was they supposedly were able to ignite a hydrogen bomb, right? So this is one of the latest steps in their, let's call it, mission to try to be able to have nuclear bombs in North Korea. We know the North Koreans are pretty far behind when it comes to this type of technology, but he's really pushing the envelope. And so being able to detonate a hydrogen bomb is a big step. And this
They talked about, I think one of the things with North Korea is so busy all the time, you
Right.
might miss that, like, this was actually a really big deal because when you look at this bomb, the yield, or how
Powerful.
powerful it is,
Right.
right? And you compare it to, so like in September of 2016, they did some type of test, and it rated 10 to 20 in kilotons, which I wasn't familiar with that term before, but comparatively to what just happened on September 3rd, it was 100 kilotons. So we're talking about 10 times more powerful than the last significant test in a year ago, right? So
Right.
something, of course, like I said, North Korea is always doing stuff, but when you compare apples to apples, this is 10 times more powerful than the last significant test that they did. So like they are really on this trajectory to at least try to make a point.
Oh, they're making a point. I mean, let's be clear about it. They're making a point with whatever this test was. Right now, people are saying that there's no way to confirm that it was actually a hydrogen bomb that was detonated.
Okay.
So I think that's important for folks to know. We know that Kim, he's one of those dudes who likes to talk a lot. He's gonna put on a show for people to try to again show whatever type of power that he wants everybody to think that he has. So there hasn't been real confirmation that it's a hydrogen bomb, but I think everybody is taking it seriously, and that's the main point that we should take away from this. So to your point of how powerful it was, they said it caused a 6.3 tremor, which is,
Right.
really powerful in
Right.
the northeast of Korea. So that within itself is cause for concern amongst the international community.
And so I know that, and so our government, of course, is trying to figure out how to respond, and do how to manage this conflict, or this basically lack of respect for what the rest of the international community would like to see,
Right.
and trying to weigh out, is military action necessary or economic sanctions the way to go. So I think it's going to be one of those things we just continue to watch. I mean, one thing that I found interesting, so just a couple days ago, Kim Jong Un celebrated the 69th year anniversary of his family's rule
Okay.
over North Korea. So I mean, these people have been in power for 7 decades, So they are really, it's kind of from their perspective, this is what they're going to do, And I think the international community, you think about Japan and China and those places that are really close to North Korea, of course they're concerned, right? Because
Right.
this directly impacts their citizens. So I think those folks or the international experts, need to weigh their options and then figure out what comes next. And clearly
so
we'll
to-
be listening and reporting and watching as well.
Right. So to that point, your boy, Mr. President, he does what he does, and he tweeted out certain things. Right. One of them was what did he say? He said that
Well, last time he said fire and
fire
fury.
fire
That
and
was last
fury.
time.
Right. The fire and fury tweet. Right. He's talking about we're locked and loaded. Right. So that's pretty aggressive talk.
Yeah.
Like yo, we ready to go to war.
Right,
That's
exactly.
that's what he's talking. But then when he was directly asked about an attack, then he was just basically like, we'll see. Right. So I mean,
He's very, he's antagonistic. That's why I call this guy Baby Trump, because they really both act in lots of the same ways. A lot of bravado, a lot
Right.
of, talk, a lot of let me show you what I'm going to do. Now, I mean, who's going to really do it? I don't know, but right. Fire and fury, locked and loaded. Kim Jong is like, they're saying, don't test your missile. He's like, yeah, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
It's just so.
yeah, the situation, like Trump tweeting is a problem. They tried to take it away from him, but they're not going to take it away from him. He's
They're
gonna.
never gonna take this dude's Twitter handle. This dude, listen, he has no allegiance. And he does not listen. The man is just egocentric. So
Yeah.
he's never giving up his Twitter handle. He probably has like 3 more just waiting for when they deactivate the prominent one.
Right. So the rest of the international community, though, obviously South Korea doesn't like it because they're neighbors, right? China and Russia, they both condemn the situation. You have Germany and France talking about sanctions, economic sanctions, tightening the EU sanctions with North Korea. The British, they didn't really say much. They kind of threw it back on the UN, right? They're like, oh, the UN needs to, the UN Security Force needs to do much. do a little bit more. So the British didn't come down as hard as, let's say, the French and the Germans. Nobody likes the situation, and so we're gonna make sure that we take a look into all of that. So yeah, so that's what's up with that. So
Well, of course, the other international news, I guess, is the Russia investigation just plods along. Special Counsel Mueller has alerted the White House that he's going to be looking to interview six top current and former advisors to Trump, who may have information in reference to Russia's meddling in the 2016 elections. And so these people include current and former Trump lineup, right? Hope Hicks, like she's a current person. But then we got Sean Spicer, he was kicked out. Reince Priebus, he was kicked out. So those two are coming up, as well as there's still some conversation as far as looking at maybe Jared Kushner.
Right.
Don Trump Jr. talked in front of the Senate this week, which was like very interesting. So the Russia investigation just plods along. I guess one of the things that's interesting. I was looking at a video this week, and this woman was breaking down the fact that the president still has a lot of power over the special investigation because the special investigator is appointed or works for DOJ, and the head of DOJ is a Trump appointment. And really, she started breaking down how, because this is not a statute, the council is not a statute, that there's all these things that that DOJ is privy to as part of the special investigation that then the president, because he has, still has executive powers, can interfere with. So like who they're going to be talking to, the Justice Department gets first dibs on what the new information is. I mean, all this stuff. And then, of course, these are Trump appointees. So I think from that short video that I watched, again, I'm not a political expert by any means, but as a regular person, I was like, dang, this thing looks like it could lose integrity really quick because, it's not, it says it's independent, but it really isn't,
Right. I mean, come on, let's look at it. You're talking about interviewing somebody's family and friends.
Well, right,
Right.
there's that too.
So is the expectation really that because there's this investigation going on that they're really gonna, be like, yeah, we did collude with the Russians to change
Right.
the outcome of the election. We agreed to that. Are they really gonna say anything to that nature?
Well, let me tell you something. So, I've been watching House of Cards, right?
Right.
And so I know I'm like 2 months behind because it came out, earlier in the summer, but I just finally got around to watching it. And of course, I'm not going to totally do a spoiler alert here, but I will just say there's an investigation going on House of Cards.
Right.
And please believe that it's very, very scripted in terms of the witnesses' testimony, right? And even though that's a parody and even though it's fictional, it really makes you think like, we're having a special election here. And if all the witnesses are, not really witnesses because they're coming in with their, exactly what they're going to say, what they're not going to say, how much integrity does the process have anyway, right?
Right.
So, I just pray to God that our current special investigation process doesn't look anything like House of Cards because we can just forget it. There's no impeachment happening here.
You know what? I think this whole Russia investigation, we talked smoke and mirrors from the beginning. I don't even really know what the end game for this special investigation is. I mean, to get to, I guess, the quote unquote bottom of things, I guess that's what they're going for here. It just never. It all seems like a setup from the beginning.
Yeah, it's probably just a way to make people say that they did something when
Right.
they really did. They're not going to do anything. We continue to say impeachment is not a real strategy for Democrats or black
It
people. It's not going
definitely
to happen. Even if you get impeached, you're still going to be there. Clinton got impeached, so come on.
Yeah, this. I wish they would finalize this, get past it, come to their conclusions, write their reports, bury it, and keep this whole thing moving because all it is a distraction for the most part.
I do think there was collusion though, because there was this
I-
article that just came out about like this business deal they were trying to do with Russia. Like, there's no way you can't tell me, as lack of Trump has no ethics. His family,
Right.
to me, appears to have no ethics. So
Right.
unethical people being given information to try to help them get to win. They're all about winning.
Right.
I'm sure there was collusion, but at this point, it's not going to change anything. So who cares,
Right.
right?
And I think that's the important point. I think a lot of us believe that there was some sort of collusion, but then it goes to, well, then what? Now
Right,
what?
exactly.
What if somebody was to slip up and say, yeah, there was collusion, then what?
Right. It's
Because
nothing.
so much stuff has happened that's been crazy that people just kind of turn the blind eye to. You're like, really? Like, and I know everybody keeps saying, oh, if this happened under Obama would have been gone. Yeah, okay. Well, the precedent has been set already. Like, this guy has done so much, said so much, been involved in so much that what hopes do we have that this special investigation is going to lead to anything tangible happening anyway?
In some ways, it just kind of shows you how much the president can get away with, or
Right.
how the system is just
It's rigged.
right.
But
It's
we've
just,
known that though, right? We've known that.
I mean, I
This is
think
this is
because
demonstrating it now.
because we all were like, Barack has to be on good behavior. Maybe he didn't. Like, I mean, maybe he didn't. Like, I'm glad he was, because I mean, of course, he was the first black president. But I mean, like, clearly Clinton wasn't on good behavior. Clearly, well, Nixon, well, I guess he's not a good example, but he wasn't on good behavior. I mean, come on, a lot of these people haven't been on good
Yeah,
behavior.
a lot of them haven't been on what quote unquote good behavior, but you would hope that the person who is in office represents at least some modicum of what the best of this country is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't know who said this. I think it was a comedian, but they were like, it looks like this dude just kind of wandered into the office and decided to stay there, right? He doesn't look like at least Obama looked like he belonged.
Yeah, Obama's
at least
presidential,
at least he
absolutely.
had some diplomacy with him. Right. At least he held up a high level of integrity, whether you agree with his politics or not. At least he held some integrity to the office. That's like it's almost like a 180 what's going on here.
Right,
And in this
absolutely.
particular
That's why it's so
investigation,
shocking, 'cause, yeah, it's crazy.
yeah, and this investigation just highlights all of that.
Yeah.
So, let's move on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so moving on to domestic issues, right? We're going to talk a bit about these hurricanes and stuff like that, right?
Right. So we know that we understand that Harvey landed and there was a whole lot of damage that had been done to that Houston area.
Yeah. Looking at the pictures, just really is incredible seeing how many houses were underwater.
Right.
How many people didn't have flood insurance?
Right. And there's a reason
really-
why they didn't have flood insurance, because it's basically like super expensive or not even offered because of where they are.
Which is so interesting, like, for me, and this is like my ignorance, because I'm like, well, if I lived in a flood zone, wouldn't I get flood insurance, right? Like, because it's a high probability that, my place is going to flood. But, one of the things I learned in talking to people was that, it's not like you, the consumer, can just go buy flood insurance per se. Like, your community has to decide that they're going to get flood insurance, or it's bigger than the individual consumer, which sounds crazy, because what I got from that conversation was like, I could want to get flood insurance, but my county or whatever would decide not to, because the flood insurance program is a government program.
Right.
So, but anyway, so Harvey came. The damage was crazy. Folks are going to be needing lots and lots and lots of help.
Tens of billions of dollars is expected to be the damage. And so the government, people are looking toward the government to provide relief towards that cleanup. And this is going to be an extended cleanup. Like, the storms are going now, money's going to come in, fairly quickly, but this is something that's going to last for a long time. It's not like they're going to just be there for a week or a month. They're going to be there for a long time trying to fix the damage that has been caused. So in order to provide relief for that area, the government had to pass bills to make sure that this money gets transferred to them. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody thought that, so this is an issue that it doesn't matter whether you're blue or red or green or whatever. Like you could be Republican, Democrat, Independent, doesn't matter. Like this is a human issue that I think everybody across the aisle can agree they need money,
Absolutely.
right? So I don't think that was too much of the issue with this situation. Everybody can agree, but what has been the issue is like, well, how do we do this, and how do we throw some other stuff into it, which
Because
happens
the
a
government
lot.
was the other issue that was coming up was that the government was going to have to shut down.
Okay, right. So we're gonna get into that. Now, there's this debt ceiling or the debt limit, right? That was about to happen during the next month or so. By October, they were going to shut down if they didn't have this debt limit. So let me talk a little bit about what the debt limit is, so that folks understand, right? Debt limit itself is the maximum amount that the U.S. Treasury can actually borrow, so that they can pay back whatever these debts. It's like you having a credit card. You have a limit, right? And you go to the bank, and the bank is like, oh, okay, we'll give you X amount of dollars. And so now you're like, oh, I got this X amount of dollars, and I need to pay my bills with this X amount of dollars. Well, that's how it works essentially with the government. So if the debt limit increases, it basically allows the Treasury to then go out and say, all right, let's pay for all this stuff that we've been creating. All right. So what happened is back in March, there was this statutory limit that was created, and the Treasury was like, "Yo, we can't operate on this. Like we can't work through this." So they're saying that they had to use what they called extraordinary measures to be able to manage the government finances from here, right? So if they didn't raise the debt ceiling, if they did not raise the debt ceiling, what would happen is there was this huge risk of the government going into default. Meaning, people be like, yo, they come calling your phone. They call you on your phone talking about your debt, knocking on your doors and stuff. They would be doing that for our government. So right now, this is a situation that would be unprecedented. Okay, this has never happened in U.S. history. Basically, policymakers have come together 84 times since 1959. It's 84. They've come together 84 times since 1959 to make sure that this government does not default on their they do not default on their loans. Now, here's another important point that I think folks should make sure they understand. Over the last 40 years, our debt has grown from a little less than 1 trillion back in 1977 to today, our debt is over 20 trillion. That's trillion with a T. Most of us can't even fathom how much $1 trillion is.
No, we can't.
We can't fathom what that is.
Right.
And it's grown since the last 40 years. It's grown from less than 1 trillion to 20 trillion.
So how does all this kind of tie in with, Harvey, and
Right.
so how does it all come together?
All right. So so Harvey, the whole thing again, everybody agreed, oh, we need to give Harvey $10 billion, whatever the number is. I'm not even sure what it was, 9.8, 9.4. It was something like that. That's what they said they would give. Right. But in addition to that, what tends to happen a lot of times is somebody comes up with the bill, and then they'll throw some other things in the back of that bill that they want to get passed. So a lot of times if people, and I'm talking about congressmen, don't necessarily read a bill through, they may be passing things, and even if they read the bill through, they probably know. They may be passing other things along the way. And this is kind of the case here where they know what was going on. So Trump met with, well, everybody thought that Trump and the Republicans were going to meet in order to extend the debt limit.
Right, because actually Steve Mnuchin, who's the Treasury Secretary, basically said when he was asked last week, he said, "Oh yeah, we're tying this into debt ceiling, like no question."
Right.
So they had already established
They
that
knew
that's
that
what
was
they
going
were
to
gonna
happen.
do. Right.
Exactly. So they were looking for, they as in Steve and the Republicans, they were looking for an 18-month extension on the debt ceiling, right? So this would give them basically what, a year and a half
Right.
to work something out. And I guess when you're dealing with trillions of dollars, you probably need some time to work things out. But the Dems were like, nah, dude, we don't 18 months, no. We want 3 months. And so they're meeting in the Oval Office and going, I guess they're going back and forth. Pelosi, who else was it in there? Schumer, right. So
And
the
then Steve
Democratic
and-
leaders and the
right,
Republican
Steve,
leaders.
Steve was like, 18
Right.
months, boss, 18 months.
18 months, right? And so they were, obviously they were in agreement because that's a huge difference. 18 months, 3
Well,
months.
also 18 months brings us right into the 2018 elections.
Exactly. And we all
Right,
know.
and we know how the press looked when we had the government shut down before. It
Right.
doesn't look good for
At
the
all.
feds,
At all.
So, the Democrats were like, no.
Right. So I think at some point the Republicans were kind of like, okay, we're gonna come to some little stalemate here. And they thought maybe they would, it wouldn't get 18 months, but I think they thought a smaller time, maybe 12 months, maybe even 9 months was going to be what they agreed to.
Right, because they basically knew that Harvey relief had to be passed.
That had to be
That had
passed.
to be passed. But so then, but right. So they thought, yeah, we're going to get good terms because
Right.
everybody's pressed to do something for Harvey.
Certainly. And so while they're like, okay, about to concede maybe 9 months, your boy turns around and be like, yep, let's go with 3 months, which surprised everybody in the room. I'm sure the Democrats were surprised. And the Republicans were incensed. But you know what? Let's clarify this a little though, because for real, conservatives weren't with the 18 months either, right? Like the true conservatives weren't with the 18 month.
So they want less government spending.
Right. So they don't really want that. So true conservatives weren't trying to have 18 months. And I think that was part of the the issue as well, that they knew they weren't going to get 18, that Trump knew he wasn't going to get 18 months. But again, they thought they would get something lesser, like maybe the 9 months or so.
Right. Well, I think so. One of the big things to me that was interesting in this whole situation was, it continues to show how Trump is. He's I don't want to say he's volatile, but like
He's unpredictable.
He's unpredictable, right? Like nobody would have expected that. I mean, Paul Ryan had just went out publicly and said, we're not going to do a short-term debt ceiling
Right.
kind of thing. And then here you go, Trump goes against his own people.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, I'm going to go with the Democrats on this one. And people are saying it's mostly about being very self-serving, because again, going back to Harvey, we got to have Harvey relief. The federal government shutting down makes, him look foolish. It was to his advantage to go with the Dems, So I think this is just who this guy is.
Well, let's also throw in there, what's his other major issue? Tax, right? Because he's been promising
Right. Tax reform. Right.
So in his mind, he's thinking, all right, if I work with them now, when it comes time for my tax reform, they'll be on my side.
Well, he also talked about I just love the Trump sound bites. I giggle about this man all the time because it always comes back to him. It's like, it's always back to me. So like some of the writers were talking about how he was like, going to be looking for the positive press he was going to get because of this bipartisan effort, and that it was going to really show that he could reach across the aisles, and but the way that he did it, of course, was by like jerking his own people. It wasn't planned.
Right.
But so then one of the articles was talking about how he said, the press was just incredible, because of this thing that we did. It always comes back to the crowds are huge. This is most extraordinary. Everything with him is big, 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 mega, 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 the best you've ever seen.
But he's always been like that, right? Even when Atlantic City was failing, he act like that wasn't happening, right? Like everything he does, he doesn't seem to acknowledge the reality of his situation. And in this case, I'm not sure if he's really acknowledging the fact that he's going directly against his own party in order to get what he might turn this win, what he expects to win in terms of tax reform. But the Dems are also expecting wins too, because they think that they have leverage now over with their major issues, which are immigration, the spending, and the health care, right?
Right.
So everybody thinks that they're getting something, which, I guess that's how it works. Hopefully everybody gets some sort of win-win. But we know that these are huge issues that aren't just going to get done in a day, and everybody's going to have to give a little to get a little on these issues. But he thinks he's going to get something when it comes time for the tax reform, because that's another one of his talking points during his campaigning. And the Dems who think they're going to get something when it comes to again, healthcare, the spending, and immigration.
Well, Trump was a Democrat before he was a Republican, so he really
Is he really a Republican now?
No, I think he was a Republican
I think
for
he's an
convenience.
opportunist,
It's just
right.
I mean, come on, Bernie Sanders, is independent, but he ran on a Democratic ticket.
Right.
I mean, it's dude is an opportunist. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But this was, funny, because again, there's no loyalty. There's no loyalty
Right.
with this man.
None at
So,
all.
all right. Well, speaking of the Democrats and
And the
speaking of
immigration,
issues that are
right.
really important to liberal community is this whole issue of the Dreamers, this whole issue of DACA, right? And DACA was an Obama era program that was put up in 2012 that was to protect young undocumented immigrants from deportation. These are people who were brought here as children to this country. And it's an approach that really looks at granting amnesty, making sure that young people who really didn't have a choice in the decision are able to live here, get an education, and be a part of the economic system, right? But so we have about 800,000 young adults who were brought to the United States illegally that qualify for the program. And so Trump basically put out that he's going to end this program within the next 6 months unless Congress does something. And so this, of course, has made everyone that has DACA status, extremely anxious and uncomfortable because they don't know now if what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen in 6 months, like one thing that we know is happening is no new applications are being taken for DACA. They are still processing renewals, but in terms of people who were hoping to apply for DACA, they're not eligible at this point. And we know the other thing it's really a challenge when you're talking about young people. I mean, we're talking about people that came as children. So the majority of these people are still in their teens, in their 20s, 30s. I mean, we're talking relatively young people mostly, right? And so it costs about $495 for you to renew your paperwork. And I believe you have to renew it every couple of years.
2 years, right?
Right. And so, I mean, we're talking about a serious amount of money that you have to come up with. And if you let your renewal lapse, right, you are at risk for not being able to get back into this protected status. So, I mean, there's a lot of concern about this action, and and Trump again going back to just inconsistencies, So, and it depends what like news outlet you listen to, because there were all these clips about during his campaign that he had a heart for these people, he loves the Dreamers, et cetera, right? And so. And that he wasn't really going to make this his priority in terms of you even heard this from Kelly, who's now the DHS guy. I believe now he's the chief,
Right.
But that their concern about immigrants was not about these children. Basically, it was quote unquote the criminal immigrant, which that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But so you have all these people saying one thing, and then bam, it's like a bait and switch kind of thing. The other thing also that what you hear, for instance, the rhetoric or the propaganda, which talks about, like Jeff Sessions said, well, the reason why we're doing this, you heard people say, well, I want our American children to dream too. And these dreamers are coming in and calling them illegal aliens. Like, I'm like, who even uses these terms? I mean, they're so derogatory. Illegal aliens. Like, what is this? outer space, and they're coming and taking jobs from our young dreamers in America. I'm like, yo, get over it. This
Right.
is not true. It's propaganda. And even Fox News today was talking about, well, different states were suing the president, so he had to do something,
Right. Okay.
So
That's important, but that's an important point, right? So I'm gonna take a step back because we're using a lot of terms, and we tend to do that here in DC. There's a lot of acronyms that we use, so make sure you understand what DACA is. It's the Deferred Action and Childhood
for childhood
for
arrival.
childhood arrivals, right? And then you mentioned Dreamers, and it's called the Dream Act: Development, Relief, and Education for Alien minorities, right? So the thing is with this is the Dream Act is legislation
Right.
that Congress has to pass,
Which they haven't.
which they have not since
16 years.
2001.
For 16 years, they haven't been able to pass.
They've just been sitting on this. Like, they came close in 2010, right? They came close. But this has to be passed by Congress and then signed by the president. That's why he said, Congress, you need to do your job, because they've been sitting on it for 16 years. So he's right. He's right. They need to do their job. I mean, I'm not going to get into, the other, we're going to talk about the, foolishness of it.
But I do think it's important to your point that President Obama did this, I guess, through executive
So
action.
exactly, and that's what I was going to get to. So I want people to understand the difference, because we keep throwing these terms around, and I'm not sure if people know the difference. The Dream Act is legislation that Congress should have done. DACA is an executive order that Obama said, "Yo, you need to make something happen." So I'm going to throw out this executive order here to make sure that these folks are good for now, at least, right? Because we know that one of the nicknames that Obama got was the what? And Porter in chief or something, deporter in chief or something. So people, really try to throw that back in his face. But obviously, he tried to allow these people to come in. So actually, it was 1.6 million undocumented people that came into the country, and 800,000 of them have applied, and they're like, "Yo, you're good." Right? So at least half of those people did everything that they were supposed to. Everything, put their application, paid their money, and did the background checks. You're not criminals. You're good. You're good. And again, there's this, there are things that they have to do along the way. After 2 years, they have to, renew. So there was this potential lawsuit led by the Texas AG, right? Who they're like, yo, it's 10 states. Yo, if you guys don't rescind this by September, they gave a date. They said September 5th, 2017. So that's why all of this stuff happened when it did, right? So let's be clear. Trump is basically acting on what this threat was from these states. I don't know, and I know a lot of people are reticent to give him any sort of credit, and maybe he does have a big heart. I don't know that for real. A lot of things he does is crazy, but he was acting on that.
DACA was probably good for his business.
Right. He was acting on this threat from these states, and the states were Alabama, Arkansas,
Always
Idaho,
Alabama. I don't trust folks from Alabama. It's like, no, I'm just teasing.
Alabama, Arkansas, Idaho, Kansas, Louisiana, Nebraska, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia. Right? So Texas, along with those states, they're like, yo, we're going to sue if you don't rescind this, and we don't want you to renew folk stuff, and we don't want you to give out new stuff. This is what they're saying. So they're going to take it. They're going to try to take it to the big courts. What happened was in the major courts, Supreme Court, they were deadlocked 4-4. They were deadlocked. So now with this Republican appointee Gorsuch in, they're like, yo, we can win this. We could win this 5-4. That's what they believe. That's why they put this date on it. That's why Trump acted when he did. That's why Jeff Sessions is saying what he's saying, because now, they really believe that they can win by them giving them 6 months to act. which with all this other stuff going on, can we really trust that Congress can do this? No, I don't. I have. Well, this is just Lamont C's opinion. I don't think we could really trust that Congress is really going to get their act together and do their job as he said.
Yeah,
but at least
they're
he
not-
could say he did what he needed to do. So he answered to these states. He answered to Texas and all these 10 states. Like, yo, see, I did my part. I said I'm going to
I guess he
rescind
didn't
it.
have a choice, really, in
didn't.
terms of that.
Right.
But, I mean, I don't have that much faith in Congress either. If for 16 years they couldn't figure
Exactly.
it out, it means it's not enough support, or maybe it's too complicated for them to figure out, or maybe they just haven't put the time in. But I do think there are a lot of competing priorities. I think,
Because this will be constitutionally now that these people could be here and be good for however it's going to work, however they're going
Yeah,
to do it.
I
But
think
this
that
is
would be
constitutional.
great.
It would be awesome if they could do it. Because I wanted to get to your other point. The other point was the folk who want to act like they're taking out jobs. And what about our dream? It's like, yo, please stop.
right, because those jobs are
stop.
still there. Those jobs are still there.
They're still there.
And you can go get them if you want them. But like we said, there's a lot of, we're funny as a country because there's a lot of work that people don't want to do.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, there's plenty of jobs that are available. It's like when we had Tanya here a few weeks ago, and she talked about how, there's a lot of farming jobs, but people who are in urban areas don't want to
They're not gonna
move to
move back
rural
to it.
areas
Right.
because that's, so then you have farms and things like that need, like the migrant worker community is necessary there because there is no one to do that work.
Right.
So, I mean, that's not the same immigration issue as
It's not.
DACA,
It's
but
not.
I'm just saying that whereas this saying, this is just rhetoric and propaganda, acting as if many of these people are taking the jobs from, quote unquote, able-bodied Americans. That's not the issue.
That's
This
not
is
the issue.
again,
Go fact check yourself.
right. This is just again disguised. I think.
It's racism.
Exactly.
It's racism. Let's call it. Don't try to hide it.
I
Why
hate
you
to
trying
always
hide
try
it?
to go back to racism, but it's there and it's prevalent throughout this administration.
You don't have to try. You don't have to try. Like it's coded. It's coded words. Nobody wants to use the term racism. I get it. Then when you use it, everybody's gonna try to throw. Oh, you're too sensitive, and you just throw that out. And I don't think people use the term correctly in a lot of cases. My thought is, about racism, but. This is what this is. Like you're being racist. Racism is when the group that's in power is trying to stay in power by subjugating those the minorities in that area. So this is an exact case of that, right? So this is classic racism where you're thinking that these folks are taking your jobs, and so you're going to prevent them from doing what they came to this country to do. So come on, man, go ahead with that.
Yep. Well, we have a really special guest coming in today, and she's going to talk with us a little bit about FEMA. But before we get to that, I mean, we just kind of got off the break of Hurricane Harvey. Right now, as we record, Hurricane Irma is hitting Florida. It's a Category 4 hurricane. As most of you guys probably know or have heard, because Irma's been on the news nonstop all week, it was set to originally go up Miami, Fort Lauderdale, up the east side. But it took an unexpected turn. Because the storm is actually so large. I mean, we've been talking about how the storm is larger than the state of
Right.
Florida. And so now it's traveling up the west side towards Tampa, St. Petersburg. And so we know people who, I was just listening to the news this morning, they were talking about the position of the not the governor, but like the mayor or what have you, in those cities was like, we're going to help Miami and all this and that. And now they're realizing that they indeed are going to be the cities that need assistance. So I think, just looking at the feedback that's come from FEMA, particularly the leadership of FEMA as well as the governor of Florida, they're saying, look, this is a storm like no other. And you have people, this is I'm going to just have to go to the left for a second. So you have Rush Limbaugh, who comes out and says, this is fake news. He said, this is fake news, this, hurricane.
Right.
And he goes off with his rhetoric, right? And he's saying this to people. And people listen to this crazy man, right? So, I heard a reporter ask the head of FEMA, what do you think about this whole notion that people shouldn't evacuate, that this is fake news? And he was like, I can guarantee you, no one has ever seen a storm like this in Florida. And this is absolutely not fake news. And you need to evacuate. So we have to be really careful, even though
But
I'm
wait,
going to.
wait. Don't forget the most important part about this. The dude had to leave because it's not fake.
Oh,
Like, dude, I mean, there's no bigger way to eat your own words. By now,
I didn't
you
even
had to
know that.
yeah, he had to evacuate because he said, yeah, so my show was going to be done by some other dude. I don't know much that,
Oh,
listen to
wow.
that. So my
I
show is
didn't
going to
know
be done
that.
by this dude because I need to go. I'm not going to get into that right now.
Oh, that's so hilarious.
So, okay,
That is
it's
so
fake.
hilarious.
It's fake.
I'm
It's
saying,
fake until it affects you. Come on, man. Stop that.
stop
Stop
lying
putting,
to the
stop,
people.
right. Stop putting that out there. I mean, you keep putting out this dangerous rhetoric, and the whole fake notion of fake news, this and that. Yeah, fake news is dangerous. And you're contributing to it. You were contributing to it by saying that this is fake. This isn't fake. That hurricane was bigger than the state of Texas. That hurricane is covering this whole state and is going to do, countless damage. And you telling people it's fake? I hope people didn't listen to you and listen to the people who really know and evacuated when they were supposed to evacuate. Because you telling people this is fake and then you have to turn around and leave. Come on, man.
Yeah, they're saying the winds are like 120 miles an hour. Right now, it's traveling up, the west side. And so, our prayers continue to be for all the families in
Right.
Texas, for all the families in Florida. You know,
Georgia, Tennessee, these are places that are going to be affected by this. By the time it reaches the northern part of the peninsula, is only going to be a category 3, but that's even strong, right? And so now, even after that, we got Jose following,
I
which is
know
it's just following basically the same path. Like it already destroyed,
the
the
Caribbean.
Caribbean, right? And so then you have something. Jose's not as powerful, fortunately, but still, when you have one powerful storm followed immediately by something else that's still powerful, it's just not good. It's not good in
Looking
the
at
least bit.
just the destruction, I would just have to say, if you have time, if you haven't looked at some of these pictures, I mean, we're so fortunate with social media and things like that. Even though we're sharing as a world a bad experience together, but we,
Right.
some of our friends who have family in the Caribbean, just have been shooting, Facebook Live and things like that, and you just see complete and total devastation, and not just in snapshots, but hearing people as they're like, "Oh my God, everyone is homeless. Oh my God, no one has a car." Like
Right.
we're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe more people didn't die." And you're just looking at these pictures, so it's extremely humbling. And for those of us that still have our vehicles, our house, our clothing intact, it really puts the onus on us to do something to help someone else.
Every little bit counts too.
Yeah.
Every little bit counts. So
So we're going to talk to someone who knows a lot about FEMA and a lot about disaster assistance. So we have Natasha Wilkins, who's coming to us. She's on the phone with us this afternoon, and she's going to talk a little bit about how FEMA helps communities like Houston and Florida. So, Natasha, thanks for coming back again to the podcast. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your work with FEMA and how you came to know so much about disaster relief.
Sure. So I've been working for FEMA since 2011. I am what's called an alternative dispute resolution advisor, and basically I'm in a employee relations type role for the agency. I support the FEMA staff that responds to disaster. So I deploy, I go out, and I provide support to folks who may have issues, concerns, complaints, that kind of a thing. I work with them, and being in that role helps me to have a perspective on kind of how FEMA works together. I have to know enough when people are coming to talk to me about what different program areas and what different work functions they are in. So I've been doing that since 2011. I started out as what's called a a reservist. And a lot of people don't know FEMA hires a lot of folks who are on call temporary workforce. The goal is to call up these folks in disaster time, have them come out and respond, and then they go home. And when they're home, they're not being paid. They're not on payroll. They're part-time on-call employees. So I started as that, and then in 2013, I became full-time with FEMA. So for me, when I'm not at a disaster, I'm still working on projects, working on things. I may be working from home or in the DC office, but my first charge is to also respond and go out to natural disasters and to support the workforce.
Okay, great. So you've been a FEMA quite some time. So it seems like you are the perfect person to be with us today.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I have a background in conflict resolution. I've worked, in lots of different areas doing dispute resolution work. But coming to FEMA was my first experience in emergency management, and it's just been fascinating. I've learned a lot in the last 6 years.
Well, we were talking about earlier in the show. I mean, we just had Harvey and now we have Irma and then we have Jose coming. It just seems like it's one hurricane on top of another. Is this is this unusual? Is this, I mean, I'm not in emergency management. Maybe this is how it is, but is this a bad season or what?
You know what? It's interesting. So we get a lot of alerts and reports from like NOAA, the National um, I forget what NOAA stands for, but they are the foremost authority about, kind of hurricane outlook for the season. And we did get a report in, say, May saying that it was going to be a busy hurricane season. As I have read and looked over that report, some of the main reasons were this year we do not have the weather phenomenon El Nino. From what I understand, El Nino kind of lower pressure systems, and so the likelihood of greater hurricanes comes out of that, and then also warmer weather. The debates are out there about global warming, but it is scientifically proven that warmer ocean temperatures create more of the conditions for hurricanes, and so we definitely have those warmer temperatures in the Atlantic and in the Gulf.
Right, right. So as we've been saying, climate change is real. Science is real. um, but okay, so that's helpful to know then, because I mean, we're talking about people are saying we haven't seen a storm like this for 100 years, or this is a 500-year storm. So this is a especially bad hurricane season.
Right, and actually the last super busy hurricane season that we saw that NOAA also forecasted was in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina happened.
Okay.
So that was the last season where they had a lot of activity, and Hurricane Katrina, got the big name and was the big storm, but there were several storms that year. There was Rita, there was a lot of other storms. So we do get storms every year, but yeah, this is one of those big years, and '05 was a pretty big year.
So, because of that type of phenomenon with all these storms and FEMA's role, not just obviously in hurricanes, but all these other natural disasters, what is it that FEMA does to help disaster victims?
Okay, so it's been, like I said, a huge learning curve since I've been with the agency. Before I worked for FEMA, I had no clue what FEMA does, and most of us don't know. So FEMA is funded through what's called the DRF. It's the Disaster Relief Fund, and it's a fund set aside by Congress for disaster relief. And it really is, I won't say a bottomless pit. It does have a lot of money available, but it does get depleted, and especially when you have a year with a lot of disasters, a lot of states being what's called declared. Congress has to replenish that budget. So what happens is disasters are local. When there's an event, a hurricane, a earthquake, a tornado, the event happens. The first I guess, line of response or responsibility is the state because, natural disasters, they happen locally. And so the state is looking at, can we financially handle what has happened? And that is in two categories. One is in what's called the individual assistance category, and that is pertaining to individuals, their household, their families. It's looking at how much insurance the people who were affected have. Will their insurance, help them to recover? How much damage happened to the homes? So there literally is a tally of how many homes or how many families were affected by this natural disaster. And once that meets a certain threshold and the state says, man, we really need federal assistance, that's when the governor makes a request to the president. And really, technically, it's FEMA. The president's name is kind of a formality, but really it's a set thing that is there. And this is based on what's called the Stafford Act, again, a piece of legislation that says this is how the United States will support states in disasters. So there's what's called individual assistance, and that's where you might get assistance with housing. Your home was destroyed. Where are you going to live? That's where you're getting assistance with rebuilding. You may, in the worst cases, if there's no housing stock, to put you in an apartment temporarily while your home is being repaired. You may get a FEMA, what they call a temporary housing unit, or you may know them as a FEMA trailer. And that's usually in areas where there is not enough stock to put you in a temporary location, especially rural areas. So that's on what's called the individual assistance side. Then there's what's called public assistance, and that deals with public infrastructure damage, roads, bridges, buildings that are of a public nature, that FEMA has a cost share with the state to provide funds to help rebuild. So those are the two main programs of FEMA, individual assistance and public assistance. And then there's something called hazard mitigation funding. That's funding that is thrown in, and it's a percentage of the public assistance funding that will help to build a structure, build buildings with mitigation in mind, so that you're offsetting the cost share to build it back better, or to implement some kind of augmentation that'll help reduce the likelihood of damage in the next storm. So yeah, it's amazing how much FEMA does that a lot of people don't know, and also the amount of money. People, think about individuals getting their FEMA check and that kind of thing, but the big dollars that FEMA provides is really in that public assistance funding, helping to rebuild public infrastructure. During Katrina, during Sandy, these big storms now, Houston, Harvey, when the administrator says we're going to be there for years, it's because they're funding public infrastructure to be rebuilt. And we know in Houston, their drainage system, really isn't up to par. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that moving forward.
That's interesting, because I think, so I think a lot of times, you talk about the FEMA check, right? And there's a thought about maybe, particularly if you've never been through the process, what that's going to look like and what it's not going to look like. So what do you think are some of the biggest maybe misconceptions about FEMA, particularly about the individual level assistance?
Well, it's so interesting. I joined FEMA again in 2011. Katrina happened in 2005. And after Katrina, there was legislation to say that FEMA would do business better in coordination with the state. So that's the other part that I didn't mention outside of, FEMA providing these dollars to help individuals and states recover. Pre disaster, they're involved in a lot of coordination, trying to get all these different state entities on the same page around disaster response. So post Katrina, I think under the Obama administration and with our last administrator, Craig Fugate, there's been this push to have a lot of people on the ground, knocking on doors, signing up for FEMA, and I think we set expectations really, really high, because I think we wanted to, make the image better. I wasn't there when Katrina happened, but the goal was to make the image better and to have a more responsive government. But I think it also sets expectations really high that FEMA is going to save the day, and FEMA can't. The organization is not funded to restore you to completion. So say you have a home valued at $150,000, $200,000. In some cases, you may not have enough insurance to cover everything. FEMA may give you a percentage of that because, again, FEMA, when you sign up for FEMA, they're looking at what insurance did you have, what protections do you already have, and then is there any funding to provide a gap. In the worst case, you had no home ownership protection, you didn't have anything. FEMA gives, the max grant is around $34,000. Imagine you lost everything. That's not going to go very far.
Right.
And again, that's an extreme case that you have nothing. So to answer your questions about managing expectations on what to expect, I think people really have to understand FEMA is not there to make you whole. FEMA, will give you some money to help you get back on your feet. In some cases, they have rental assistance programs where you can live in temporary housing and get rental assistance for a maximum of 18 months while your home is being, renovated. But I think that, people really have to understand that FEMA is not going to make you whole. There's also, every situation is different. So your neighbor may get more money than you get, and you don't know what those various factors are. Some of them are income related, they're insurance related. So again, I've heard of some people being very frustrated because maybe their neighbor got more money than they did. But really managing expectations, really looking at, what insurance do you have, understanding, what are the laws and regulations about required flood insurance. I don't want to go too deep into the flood insurance program because FEMA does kind of regulate flood zones in a way. They look at areas and they may say that, a certain area needs to have flood insurance. I don't know in depth about that program, but it's important to know and understand if you have the proper insurances, because in some areas, if you're not covered, you may not get anything after you've had, after there's been a disaster. So yeah, there's so much nuance to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a lot of information that I know I didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of people appreciate. So, to kind of wrap all of this up, earlier you did talk a little bit about the part-time help. Is there a way folks could who are interested in working with FEMA? Is there a way that they could do so?
There is. So Another piece that I didn't mention is that FEMA really does try to support the local economy when it comes to a state. So there's what's called a local hire initiative where FEMA will hire folks locally who they may be disasters, what we call survivors. We like to call them survivors as opposed to victims. So there may be job opportunities. I would look on your local workforce website to see when those positions are becoming available. So there's a local hire initiative. If you're interested in becoming a FEMA reservist, you want to go on usajobs.gov and see if there are what's called reservist positions available. Again, these are part-time on-call positions. So for some people, it works. For some people, it doesn't. But a lot of those positions where they can call out this workforce and ramp up quickly are available. And I know they're becoming more available as, more of these disasters are happening. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but hurricane season goes from roughly August through October and now even November. I've seen hurricanes in November. So we're really just kind of at the middle of hurricane season.
Okay. So you
Yeah,
say more to come, maybe, right? Oh, goodness.
possibly. I don't want to put that out there, but based on what's happening, possibly there could be other named storms, large storms. But yeah, if you want to help, then there's also the opportunity outside of FEMA just to volunteer. Lots of agencies and organizations appreciate the help in volunteering. It's most helpful if you actively seek out an organization and not just show up. I mean, it's nice that you want to help, but when you show up on the ground, especially when you're in the middle of response, when there's search and rescues and things are dire, sometimes that's not the most helpful because you might be in the way. But if you get with an organization that has been tasked with certain responsibilities, that's a really helpful way that you can jump in and help. And then also, of course, donations. Find whichever organization speaks to you personally and donate. People are always in need, and again, that speaks to the government can't do everything, and it really takes a whole community. We have the saying of being a whole community approach to response because it will take a whole community to support and help that particular area get back on their feet.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Natasha, for joining us on the show today. We really appreciate your time.
You're so welcome. And if you want to know more about FEMA, go to FEMA.gov. They will list the states that have disaster declarations. They will tell you, again, what type of funding they were granted. They have a lot of preparedness information. We really try to push people to be prepared and know what your plans are. If something comes to your area, know what your evacuation routes are. How do you prepare? How do you stay safe? So please go to the website and find out more. A lot of stuff to know. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Natasha. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye. Wow, that was really great. I had no idea that FEMA did all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, she shared a lot of information, and hopefully people will take heed and visit FEMA.org. Was it FEMA.gov?
Right.
And really know not only what FEMA does, but what you can do in case of emergencies.
Right. I mean, that kind of just leads us into our normal Act Up segment, which I think she really pretty much said everything that we were going to say, because really right now it's for each of us to kind of look at ourselves and say, what can I do? And really nothing is too small Nothing is too big. I mean, we just went out today and bought some school supplies. You know, when you think about people having to leave their house right at the beginning of school and how people stock up for going back to school, and clearly taking backpacks and notebooks and paper was not on anybody's mind when you're trying to get out. You know, you could only take 2 bags of stuff. So, you know, there's all these efforts to fill up the truck, backpack, school supply drives. So that's what we're doing. And we're also supporting the Red Cross. I know that was another thing I heard people say about, oh, the Red Cross is controversial. But I was informed recently that, you know, the Red Cross is one of the quickest groups on the ground, like FEMA. And so, you know, giving to the Red Cross I really support them. And so that's one of the groups that we decided to give to as a family.
So my act up, a couple of things. First, go to defenddaca.com. You can learn a lot about the initiatives that folks are trying to do to help make sure that DACA and the DREAM Act stay around. So that, once again, that's Defend DACA, DEFENDDACA.com. Okay, go visit that site. And the second thing is, again, that we want to give our condolences to Sabria, who is the normal hostess of the show. She did have a family situation, and so my second act up is to, you know, make sure you tell people that you love them. You know, hug your family in the midst of all these disasters and what have you. You just never know when something's going to go on. So, you know, hug your family, send them a text, tell them you love them, your friends, family, you know, just let folks know that you care. That's mine.
All right. Well, until the next time, I think that's it. We had a great week, and I hope everyone has an awesome week too until we see you or talk to you again. I'm Sheila Strain Clark for Black Women Talk Politics.
I'm Lamont Clark, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.